Buongiorno tutti quanti e benvenuti a lezione 21 di Italian for Beginners. La lezione di oggi è una delle più importanti del corso. Oggi impariamo a coniugare i verbi regolari della prima coniugazione, cioè quelli che terminano in are. In italiano ci sono tre tipi di verbi, detti coniugazioni. Quasi tutti i verbi terminano in una di tre possibili desinenze: are, ere o ire. La lingua italiana ha ereditato queste desinenze dal latino. Ci sono altre desinenze possibili, tipo orre, arre e urre. Queste desinenze sono tuttavia rare, allora per adesso lasciamo perdere. I verbi in are sono i verbi più comuni in italiano. A questo proposito, i linguisti dicono che una parola è in una desinenza, che vuol dire che quella parola termina in quella desinenza. La maggioranza dei verbi in are sono regolari, cioè vengono coniugati secondo un certo complesso di regole che si possono applicare a qualsiasi verbo regolare. Cominciamo con il brano all'inizio di pagina 65. Come al solito lo leggerò e poi sottolineerò le forme di verbi in are, così potrete vedere come si usano. Sono Sara e abito a Roma con un'amica, Giulia. Durante la settimana io lavoro e Giulia studia. Il sabato e la domenica incontriamo gli amici, mangiamo una pizza, ascoltiamo sempre la musica e andiamo spesso a ballare. And here are the verbs. So, in this lesson, we're going to be talking about the present tense. So, English has three main present tenses. There's the simple present tense, such as I listen to music. There's the present continuous tense, also called the present progressive tense, which is like I am listening to music. So that's an action that's ongoing in this moment. I listen to music, that mainly means in general. You can also use the form I do listen to music to emphasize that you do. Like if somebody says, you never listen to music, I do listen to music. You have the emphatic form. All of these are represented by the simple present tense in Italian. So there's only one tense that refers to all of these things. When you have to make a distinction between these, you either add additional words or change the structure of the sentence to change emphasis. And those are things that you'll learn how to do slowly as the course progresses. Okay. Verbs have tense and mood. I want to talk a little bit about verbs in general and what their characteristics are. So tense indicates when an action happens or has happened. So you have the present tense like we discussed. You also have like the future tense like I will listen to music. You have the past tense like I listened to music or I have listened to music. Those are all tenses. Mood is a little bit harder to grasp, and it's based on the purpose for which the verb is being used. So for a statement of fact or to ask a question, you use the indicative mood. That's what we're going to be using in this chapter. And the indicative mood is, anything that makes a factual statement, like Joe plays the guitar, Anna goes to school. Any of that kind of stuff is in the indicative mood. The imperative mood is to tell someone to do something. Listen to music. That's the imperative mood. The conditional mood indicates a conditional action, like I would listen to music if I didn't have to work right now. That's a conditional verb. And then to express a wish or possibility, you use the subjunctive mood, which is kind of rare in English, but you hear it in phrases like, I wish I were rich. Were is in the subjunctive mood in that case. So don't worry about this too much. You can see there's an asterisk after asking a question under the indicative mood, and that's because in some languages there's a separate mood for asking a question, but in Italian and in English those are the same form, so we'll just call it all indicative. Don't worry too much about moods. They're a thing that is difficult to understand conceptually, but when you actually use them, it makes perfect sense. So just kind of roll with it, but I just wanted to bring them up as one element of verbs. Verbs also have an infinitive, which talks about an action in general without indicating who's doing it or when it's happening. So in English, the infinitive starts with to be, to eat, to go, to listen to music, to do whatever. In Italian, infinitives are made up of only one word, and that word almost always ends in are, ere, or ire. And the exceptions, we'll talk about them at some point, but they're not very common. All verbs have subjects. Since a verb is an action, there's always someone or something that does the thing. Sometimes the subject is an impersonal subject and we just use it for that, like it's raining. In Italian, they don't use a pronoun, they just will say piove, which is raining. So some verbs also have objects, someone or something that they do the thing to. So I walk my dog. I'm doing the action, that makes me the subject, and then who am I doing it to? The dog. So the dog is the object. And the subject and the objects, both of them can be either nouns or pronouns. Like in English, there are three persons in Italian that apply to verbs. The person has to do with who the subject is. So in the first person is io in the singular and noi in the plural. So I and we are first person. This is the same as in English. There's the second person. Tu and lei are singular, and voi and loro are plural. And then in the third person, we have he, she, it, or they. And Italian has lui, lei, and loro. A quick note about formale and she, lei. These verbs with those subjects, with lei, are conjugated the same whether the lei refers to the second person or the third person. So in all of the charts that I've made, I've grouped those two together. That doesn't mean that lei, when used in the second person, isn't a second person pronoun. It just means that its verbs are conjugated the same way as the other lei. And it's the same with formal loro. Formal loro is much less common. It's very rarely used. And it has the same forms as the regular loro, the they. So those are grouped together when I make the charts. All right. So I wanted to also call out what it means to conjugate a verb. I know that there's a lot of kind of linguistic jargon that ends up having to come up in foreign language lessons, and so I want to make sure that I'm explaining everything adequately. So to conjugate a verb means to change its form to use the appropriate tense, mood, person, and number for the situation. sounds a little daunting, but luckily there are systematic ways to do this, and most verbs are regular and follow particular rules. So in English, we often indicate tense, mood, person, and number by adding additional words to the sentence and using pronouns. So I went versus he went. Person is changed just by using pronouns. Or I go versus I would go. The conditional mood is formed by adding the word would. So that's a little different in Italian, because in Italian usually these meanings are expressed by changing the verb itself. Most verbs do follow a clear pattern. So like in English, with most verbs you can just add ed to the end and that's past tense. There are exceptions, and there are exceptions in every language, but most verbs do follow a clear pattern. However, many common verbs are irregular, and that's actually causal. Like, it turns out that when people use words frequently, they tend to evolve into new words and evolve new forms and get used in different ways, whereas words that don't get touched as much just stay the way they are. So in most languages, the irregular verbs are unfortunately the common ones. For that reason, you'll need a book or app where you can look up verb conjugations until you have them memorized, because even some rare verbs or some verbs that aren't as common will end up surprising you, so it's worth making sure you have a place to look them up. Allora, verbi regolari in are. So most verbs in the first conjugation, the ones in are regular. So the first thing that you have to do to change the form is drop the infinitive ending from the verb. So drop the are to get what's called the stem of the verb. In Italian, the stem is la radice, just as a point of interest. So the stem of incontrare is incontr. Then the stem of guardare is guard. Oops, I spelled that wrong. That's supposed to say stem. So endings are then attached to the stem to indicate the tense, mood, person, and number. Because the ending of the verb in Italian tells you the person and number, subject pronouns are often left out. So you would say that, like, I'm trying to think of an example. For example, if you're talking about yourself, often you won't say io, I do whatever. Io abito a Roma. It would be abito a Roma, because it ends with an O, which we'll see in the next slide, that the subject is io. So we're going to use the verb abitare as an example. This verb means to live somewhere. And here they are. So you can see both what the endings are and how they attach to the stem. So the stem of abitare is abit. So we have io abito, tu abiti, lui, lei o lei abita, noi abitiamo, voi abitate, and loro o loro abitano. This verb is a little bit particular in that it has the stress on the first syllable. Not all verbs do, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But these are the endings. The o for io, I for tu, a for lui, lei or lei, iamo for noi, ate for voi, and ano for loro. So here are some examples. Oggi incontro gli amici. You can see how in this example the io subject is implied by the fact that the verb is incontro instead of something else. Carlo studia molto is another one. That one is pretty straightforward. Ascoltiamo della musica ogni sera. That's also relatively straightforward. It's also another one where the noi is left out because we would know that iamo means that the subject is noi. I giovani di oggi guardano troppo la TV. Young people these days watch too much TV. So the subject here is I giovani, young people, and the verb is guardare, which becomes guardano. Frequentate l'Università di Melbourne anche voi. Frequentate, again, we could have left out the voi if this wasn't a question like it is. So, I mean, you could say frequentate l'Università di Melbourne, but since we wanted to say, do you go to the University of Melbourne too, anche voi was necessary. Don't sweat this one too much, but that's just another example. Lavori in quella farmacia in via Giulio Cesare, no? Don't you work at that pharmacy on via Giulio Cesare? So, yeah, again, tu is left out because we know from the ending that lavori has the subject tu. So there's only one rule that governs which syllables are stressed in conjugated verbs, and the rest of them you just have to figure out on a case-by-case basis. So third-person plural verbs have the stress on the same syllable as the third-person singular form of the same verb. So let's take abitare as an example. That was our first example. So the third-person singular form of abitare is abita, and it has the stress on the first syllable, abita. So in the third-person plural form, it's loro abitano. Abitano. On the other hand, if we have another verb, arrivare, and the third-person singular of that one is arriva, then the third-person plural becomes loro arrivano. Arrivano. Some dictionaries and verb conjugators include information about the stress of specific conjugated verbs, but a lot really don't. It took me a while to find one that did, and the one that I did find that will tell you the pronunciation of conjugated forms is word reference, and you have to kind of dig for it. It's, if you're using the app, it's under the Italian definitions section. So that's one possibility of a place to get this information, but it can be kind of tough. So the best thing you can do is really listen as much as possible to hear how the different forms of each verb are pronounced. They will always follow spelling conventions. It's just the stress. Like, there's no rule that is a reason why it's pronounced abita and not abita. It's just pronounced abita. There's no reason why abitare becomes abita and arrivare becomes arriva. There's no reason for that. So that's just something you have to learn on a case-by-case basis. Cambiamenti ortografici. Some verbs change spelling in certain forms for pronunciation reasons, and these are still considered regular because the same rules apply uniformly to all verbs that they apply to. So in this section, we're going to talk about verbs whose stem ends in I, such as studiare, mangiare, cominciare, etc. And we'll also talk about verbs whose stem ends in C or G. So, yeah, examples to come. So, verbi con radici in I. In some verbs, there is an I directly before the infinitive ending, like studiare, cominciare, mangiare, cambiare are a few examples. In these verbs, the I is actually dropped in both the first person plural form and the second person singular form. There's a simple reason for this, and that is so that you don't have a double I. So if you think about it that way, it's relatively intuitive. So you can see here that we have the verb cambiare with the stem cambi, and in the first person singular, it's cambio. Yeah, that makes sense. So drop the are, add the o. Third person plural, same thing. Drop the are, add the a. In the second person singular, that would make the form cambii, and we don't really want that. We want cambi. So the I from the stem gets dropped before the ending is added. Same with cambiamo. We want it to be cambiamo, not cambiamo. So we drop the I from the stem before adding the ending. And that's the same for all regular verbs whose roots or whose stems end in I. Sorry, radice means both stem for verbs and it also means root. So I got a little confused there. Verbi con radici in C o G. When a verb stem ends in a hard C or G, an H is added after it in certain forms so that it continues to be a hard sound. We saw this same kind of change with nouns, like how amica becomes amiche, and you add an H to that plural so that it becomes amiche instead of amice. This is the same idea. So some examples here are dimenticare, spiegare. I guess dimenticare is on the list twice. It's a special one, I suppose. And pagare is another example. So let's start with pagare, and I'll give you an example with dimenticare as well, since it's so special, and since I want you to see both with the C and the G. So yeah, you can see here, pago, io pago, lei, lui, lei paga. You don't need to add the H there because G is already hard before O or A. On the other hand, in the tu and noi forms, just adding the ending to the stem would make it paggi and paggiamo, and we don't want that. So we add the H, so it's tu paghi, noi paghiamo. With dimenticare, same idea. Io dimentico, loro dimenticano, and yeah, that makes sense because the C is hard before the A and before the O. But in the tu and noi forms, we have dimentichi and dimentichiamo with the H, because otherwise it would be dimentici and dimenticiamo, and that's wrong. We say dimentichi, dimentichiamo. Okay, adverbs, briefly. A lot of adverbs of time, adverbs that indicate when you do something, how often you do something, that kind of thing, follow a verb directly in Italian. Guardiamo sempre la TV la sera. So we always watch TV in the evening. So in English, you can see we always watch. And in Italian, if you translated that literally, that would be noi sempre guardiamo. And that's not really, I don't know if it's grammatically incorrect, but it's certainly not idiomatic. We would say guardiamo sempre la TV la sera. Visiti spesso l'Italia. Do you go to Italy often? Is another example. So again, we would say visiti l'Italia spesso, and that's again not necessarily incorrect per se, but it's not as common as visiti spesso l'Italia. So if you want to say never, never is an important one. This is expressed with a double negative in Italian. Non mi telefoni mai. You never call me. So non goes in front and then mai goes at the end. Non mi telefoni mai. Always remember to use non with mai and not just mai in cases like this. So the asterisk is just the point below this, which is that if you're using never as a one-word answer to a question, you can use it alone without non or without another negative. So if somebody says like, yeah, have you ever been to Rome? Mai means never. Durata di un'azione, the duration of an action. So in English, we talk about how long we've been doing something using a perfect tense. We use either we have lived in Melbourne for 2 years. I have lived in Melbourne for 2 years. Or I have been speaking Italian since I was 16. Or we haven't talked in a long time. Those are all perfect tenses. In Italian, when we want to express this in Italian, the present tense is used along with da. So, abito a Melbourne da 2 anni. I've lived in Melbourne 2 years. Parlo italiano da quando avevo 16 anni. I've been speaking Italian since I was 16. Literally, this would translate as, I speak Italian since when I was 16. So, you can see that the grammar for that is just a little different between Italian and English. Or we can say, non parliamo da molto tempo, and that means we haven't talked in a long time. So, in Italian, this stuff with da being used to describe the duration of ongoing actions is one of the biggest mistakes that English speakers make. English speakers tend to use the perfect tense in Italian as well, which we haven't covered yet, to say that I've lived in Melbourne for 2 years or whatever. The catch is that doesn't mean the same thing in Italian. It's valid Italian and it means something different. Ho abitato a Melbourne per 2 anni. That's using the perfect tense. Ho abitato is the perfect tense of abitare. Ho abitato a Melbourne per 2 anni means I lived in Melbourne for 2 years. It means I don't live there anymore. So if you want to say I live there and it's been 2 years since I moved there, that is abito a Melbourne da 2 anni. So that's really important. It's one of those things, a lot of mistakes that you make will just be strange or silly to people listening, but that's a mistake that could actually make you not understood. So here we go. Da is a common preposition in Italian, and it can mean different things in different contexts. A lot of the time it means from. When you're discussing time, you generally would translate da as since. That only applies when you're discussing time. If you're using since to refer to causation, use perché or siccome. Da is only since when you're talking about since last year or whatever. So consider these additional examples. Some of them include some stuff we haven't quite covered yet, but I'll try to walk you through it. Studio fisica da settembre. I have studied physics since September. Non mangio dalle 9 di mattina. I haven't eaten since 9 in the morning. Sono molto contento da quando ci siamo sposati. I've been very happy since we got married. So, again, like we said with da quando avevo 16 anni, again, we're using this I'm very happy since when we got married is how you would say it in Italian. Okay, so I want to cover one more really important thing, which is verbs and prepositions. In both Italian and English, there are certain verbs that are always used with certain prepositions. So, like in English, we say to believe in something. You always say in with believe. And in Italian, that happens to be different, but we'll talk about it when we get there. Some verbs in Italian require a preposition when the English verb that corresponds to it does not require a preposition, or vice versa. So it's important to kind of learn about the usage of different verbs because sometimes it's not exactly the same. One important thing to be aware of is that when you're working with prepositions, and prepositions are words like in or on or under or by or to or that kind of thing, there's no consistent and literal translation for any prepositions between Italian and English. That's true of every language I've learned. There's prepositions never translate literally. So when you're learning any new vocabulary, it's important to also learn what prepositions you need to use the new verb, and sometimes adjective. So like, for example, interested is an adjective, and we use it with the preposition in. So you want to make sure that if you use an adjective like that, you also remember what preposition goes with it. So here are a couple of verbs that are listed in the book that do include prepositions. Some of them include prepositions in English and some of them don't. We'll start with cominciare. Cominciare a fare qualcosa. A is the preposition that goes with cominciare. Comincio a suonare la chitarra. I'm starting to play the guitar. Comincio a suonare la chitarra. Telefonare also goes with a. This is one that does not require a preposition in English, but it does require one in Italian. So you would say Riccardo telefona a Chiara tutti I giorni. Telefona a Chiara. He calls Chiara every day. Imparare a fare qualcosa, to learn to do something. Il bimbo impara a camminare. The child learns to walk. Insegnare a is to teach to do something. La professoressa ci insegna a parlare italiano. Insegna a parlare italiano. So, yeah, just when you are looking at these verbs, remember that they always go with a. Here are some common verbs that do not use prepositions in Italian but do in English. So in English, we would say, I listen to music. In Italian, we would say, ascolto la musica. So, sta zitto, ascolto il professore. Be quiet, I'm listening to the professor. You can see that there's nothing in this sentence that corresponds to. It's just ascolto il professore. Aspettare is the same way. That's to wait. So we would say, how long have you been waiting for the bus? In Italian, you say, da quanto tempo aspettate l'autobus? Da quanto tempo aspettate l'autobus? Guardare is the other one that is in this chapter. Guardo I cani che giocano. That's, I look at the dogs playing. So we say, I look at the dogs playing. In Italian, they say, guardo I cani che giocano. Il verbo tornare. I wanted to cover this because the book is a little bit wrong about this. The book says tornare is used with a, and I don't really want you to get that in your head because it's not always true. The verb tornare uses prepositions in the same way as andare, which means to go, and that's going to be discussed in the next session or in the next video. So, yeah, just kind of keep an open mind about that. It's often true that tornare is used with a. It's not always true. So keep an open mind about that. All right, I compiti. For this lesson, do the esercizi on pages 67 and 68. This is again in the new book. And next lesson, we will talk about dare, stare, andare, e fare. Those are 4 common irregular verbs that end in are. They're some of the only irregular are verbs. And so we'll talk about what forms they take. There are also several idiomatic expressions that use dare, stare, andare, and fare. So we'll talk about using them idiomatically, use of andare with modes of transportation. Andare means to go, so you want to know how to say you went with the train or in the car or whatever. Preposition use with andare we'll also touch on in the next lesson, and there will be a side note on the present progressive tense, which Italian actually does have, but isn't used as often. So yeah, thanks for watching. I hope that you've enjoyed the video, and please subscribe to my channel if you'd like to see the next one. As usual, you can leave questions in the comments, and I always appreciate corrections from native Italian speakers. So if you have noticed something wrong with this video, please leave that in the comments as well. Thanks for watching. See you next time.